other radical terrorists who attack our country and are seeking to destroy Western civilization itself. These terrorists seized our embassy and took 66 Americans hostage in Tehran. They slaughtered 241 U.S. service members with a truck bombing in Beirut. They killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. And this is just a small fraction of their blood-soaked record. Prior leaders have been too weak and ineffective to address this threat. Some, like Barack Hussein Obama, even sent pallets of cash that ultimately financed this terrorist crusade against the United States and our people, while signing stupid and naive deals that put Iran on the path of developing nuclear bombs. After years of endless appeasement and empty statements from politicians on both sides of the political aisle in this town, President Trump is finally the man of action. President Trump is holding these monsters accountable and permanently extinguishing their nuclear ambitions. Future generations of Americans will look to this moment as the moment where the specter of a nuclear armed Iran ended. At the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, launched last weekend, President Trump laid out clear objectives to the American people on what the U.S. military seeks to accomplish through these major combat operations. Number one, destroy the regime's deadly ballistic missiles and completely raze their missile industry to the ground. Number two, annihilate the Iranian regime's navy. And so far, we have destroyed more than 20 Iranian ships, including their top submarine last night, using a torpedo for the first time since World War II. There is not a single Iranian ship underway in the Arabian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, or the Gulf of Oman. Number three, Operation Epic Fury will ensure the regime's terrorist proxies in the region can no longer destabilize the region or the free world and attack our armed forces. And thus far, Iran's proxies are hardly putting up a fight. Number four, this mission will guarantee that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. It's safe to say that thus far, Operation Epic Fury has been a resounding success. American forces have struck more than 2,000 targets, destroying hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles, launchers, and drones. As the Department of War said this morning, we expect to have complete and total dominance over Iranian airspace in the coming hours, clearing the skies for our brave warriors to continue achieving these noble and long sought-after objectives. There's been a lot of misreporting and intellectual dishonesty from the American media on why President Trump decided to launch this operation. So let me remind you, Operation Midnight Hammer, which took place last June, obliterated Iran's 3 major nuclear sites. Yet the terrorist Iranian regime has remained fully committed to rebuilding its nuclear program. How do we know this? Because Iran has pursued this path of war and violence despite President Trump dispatching 2 of his top and most trusted negotiators to engage in exhaustive and good faith negotiations to try and reach a deal. And the world knows this president's preference is always peace and diplomacy first. Look no further than the 8 additional global conflicts he has ended in the past year as proof. Unfortunately, the terrorist Iranian regime refused to negotiate in good faith. They chose this path of violence and destruction, and they are reaping the consequences of their horrible decision. The regime did what they always have done. They lied, they delayed, they tried to string the United States of America along. They wanted to buy themselves time to continue building ballistic missiles and other deadly weaponry that could harm our U.S. personnel and troops in the region, and to continue aggressively pursuing their unacceptable nuclear ambitions. U.S. negotiators offered to lift crippling sanctions on Iran and even provide nuclear fuel to Iran at no cost to support a civil nuclear power program. They additionally had the opportunity to accept U.S. support as an investor in potential projects to develop peaceful nuclear energy together under a mutually agreed-upon framework. Yet in response, Iran would have to forfeit their enrichment capacity once and for all. But Iran rejected. They accepted none of these generous and unprecedented offers by the United States. Simply put, they refused to say yes to peace. And their refusal made clear that their #1 priority was building a nuclear weapon with which to threaten the United States of America, Again, the country they have been chanting death to for nearly 5 decades. Let me state this again clearly. Iran rejected the path of peace because the terrorists in charge of this regime wanted to build nuclear weapons to use against Americans and our allies. President Trump made the determination, a courageous determination and decision, that the path the United States was on with Iran had only one outcome: massive death and destruction at the hands of a nuclear-armed terroristic regime. That path of death and destruction and threats against the American people have ended with Operation Epic Fury. Operation Epic Fury has forged a new path that will better ensure the security of the United States and our people. The terrorists made a bet that President Trump would be like many of his predecessors, that he would just talk and he would refuse to enforce his clear red lines. But that has proven to be a catastrophic error in judgment. When President Trump makes a threat, and I have reiterated that threat many times from this podium to all of you over the past year, President Trump does not bluff. The president's words are backed up by the mightiest warriors in the world who possess the most sophisticated capabilities this world has ever known. 49 and counting of the most senior Iranian regime leaders, including the supreme leader, have already been wiped off the face of the earth. Make no mistake, killing these brutal terrorists is good for America and makes the world a much safer place. I want to also extend our prayers and condolences to the families of the 6 U.S. military service members who have been lost in Operation Epic Fury. These heroes represent the very best among us. They laid down their lives in defense of our country, and we will never forget their legacy or their sacrifice. As the president said, we grieve for these American patriots and their families as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. President Trump intends to attend the dignified transfer of these American heroes to stand in grief alongside their families. I understand the Department of War is working on scheduling this transfer, and we will provide updates at the appropriate time. Finally, the Trump administration is also doing everything within our power to protect Americans in harm's way. Since the launch of Operation Epic Fury, more than 17,500 Americans have safely returned home from the Middle East, with over 8,500 American citizens returning home to the United States just yesterday alone. If you are a U.S. citizen in the Middle East looking to return to the United States, the Secretary of State asks that you please register with the State Department at step.state.gov. The State Department will identify where you are and provide travel options directly to you. The administration is already rapidly chartering flights free of charge and booking commercial options, which we expect to become increasingly available as time goes on and the success of this mission further comes to fruition. I know the President and Secretary of State Rubio have been in touch as well with our allies in the region directly about this problem, making it clear that it is a priority of the United States of America to bring every American home. The Trump administration will not rest until every American is home safely and until the terrorist threat from Iran has been completely destroyed. With that, I'll take your questions. Eric, why don't you kick us off today? Thank you for being here.
Caroline, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, Iran's regime, its leadership has largely been decimated. Do we have a sense right now of who is actually calling the shots in Iran? And we're also hearing reports that the Supreme Leader's son may be named his successor. Do you have any more information about that? I just had a quick follow-up as well.
Sure. We've seen those reports as well, of course, and this is something that our intelligence agencies are closely monitoring and looking at. The truth is, we'll have to wait and see. The president has said repeatedly that the objectives of Operation Epic Fury are the 4 military objectives that I laid out for you previously: to destroy Iran's navy, to destroy their ballistic missile capacity, to ensure their proxies in the region can no longer harm Americans, and to also ensure that they can never obtain a nuclear weapon. As for what comes next for Iran, the president has said, of course, it's a good thing for the United States to want freedom for the Iranian people, and ultimately we hope that freedom rests in their hands.
Caroline, we see the Arab and Muslim nations coming under fire as well. President Trump's vision for the region has been to bring the Arab and Muslim nations to the table together, Abraham Accords, obviously, with Israel. If this regime topples, could we see a new day in the region and really a new Middle East come out of this when the dust settles?
Well, though the greatest deterrent to true and long-lasting peace in the Middle East has always been the rogue Iranian terrorist regime. And our Arab and Gulf partners in the nation admit that, as well as, of course, our close friend and ally Israel. We have seen all of the Arab partners in the region come together during this time on the phone with President Trump, many of them commending him for this bold and brave action to protect American troops and our bases in the region that are housed in many of these Arab and Gulf states. And I know that many of these regional partners are contributing their air defense capabilities as well. Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and the president continues to be engaged with all of them. Welcome. Garrett.
Also have two, if you'll humor me. Axios, I think, was the first to report this morning this phone call between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying that Netanyahu had given the U.S. this information about where the Ayatollah would be and that he'd be with his deputies on Saturday. How important was that information in the president making the decision to strike where and when he did?
I think it was important with respect to the timeline. But I think the president, prior to that phone call, had a good feeling that the Iranian regime was going to strike the United States assets and our personnel in the region. And the president was faced with a choice. Does the United States of America use our military and our capabilities to strike first, to take out this threat that has been threatening our country and our people for 47 years? Or is he going to, as commander-in-chief, sit back and watch as the rogue Iranian regime attacks our people in the region? That's obviously an unacceptable decision. For the second choice there is unacceptable to the president, which is why he made this decision. As for where the Ayatollah was going to be, that obviously had an impact on the timeline of the operation, but not quite the president's decision in its entirety.
And then on the way the public is viewing this, we were sitting here last week. I asked you if the president was going to make this a big part of the State of the Union, if he felt like he had to sell the possibility that he'd do strikes like this. We're now 5 days on. He hasn't done kind of the traditional speech to the nation part of it. Does the president believe the country supports the actions that he's taken so far in Iran?
I think he does. And I think the president knows the country is smart enough to read past many of the fake news headlines produced by people in this room that this action was unjustifiable. Again, this is a rogue terrorist regime that has been threatening the United States, our allies, and our people for 47 years. And the American people are smart enough to know that. And they've also been smart enough to listen to the president himself, not just over the past year in this second term, but during his first term as president, and also for the past 40 years of his life. This is a president who has been remarkably consistent on this issue, that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And the president tried peace through diplomacy exhaustively and extensively. He and his team gave it their best go, and the president ultimately came to the determination of that peace was not a pursuable path. The Iranian regime, they want death, they want destruction, they want to kill Americans, and that's unacceptable to this president. It's intolerable to him as commander-in-chief. Jackie.
Thank you, Caroline. Obviously, seen the update from the State Department on the 17,500 Americans that have already come back, including some 8,000 just yesterday. There are still 6,000 that are looking to get out, as I understand it. And just in the context of what you just told Garrett about the president's decision on a timeline, if he had decided to do this strike before receiving, the specific intelligence about the meeting on Saturday, should there have been more done in advance of the strikes to try to get those Americans in the region resources and information to get home before day 3 of the war?
There was many signs put out by the State Department, and I wish that everyone in this room would report on them. The Secretary of State issued level 4 travel advisories dating back to January for many of these countries in the region. On January 14th, the U.S. mission to Saudi Arabia advised personnel and Americans to exercise increased caution and limit non-essential travel to any military installations. On February 11th, the U.S. Department of State Consular Affairs shared a list of countries with level 4 do not travel advisories. You can't be much more clear than that. Do not travel to these following countries. On February 23rd, the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon ordered non-emergency government personnel and family members to leave Lebanon due to safety risks, and we helped them do that. On March 2nd, the State Department urged U.S. citizens to depart Lebanon immediately. With respect to Iran, on February 27th, the Secretary designated Iran as a state of sponsor of wrongful detention and stated no Americans should travel to Iran for any reason. And again, on February 27th, the U.S. ambassador to Israel warned Americans to leave Iran, and they provided travel advisory alerts through the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. So the State Department was all hands on deck on advising extreme caution and do not travel alerts to Americans in the region. With respect to the Americans who are still in the region now, again, the State Department is asking that they register at the website so they can directly identify you, and we are actively and rapidly working to charter flights. There is some commercial flights that are taking off intermittently from these countries, and we plan to get Americans on board as quickly as possible, again, free of charge to them. And we have some additional measures that I think will be announced in the coming days. Again, I can also reiterate from the president's perspective, this is something he's brought up directly with our allies and partners in the region, that we expect their help in getting Americans home, and we will do that, and we will not rest until every single American is returned home safely.
Thank you. And then one follow-up just on how people might be experiencing this at home. With respect to the economy and the cost of oil spiking, is there a need to start those Navy escorts in the Strait of Hormuz now to sort of blunt the impact to people? And also, because Spain is a member of the EU, does that at all put a wrinkle in the president's plan for a trade embargo with them?
With respect to Spain, I think they heard the president's message yesterday loud and clear. And it's my understanding over the past several hours they've agreed to cooperate with the U.S. military. And so I know that the U.S. military is coordinating with their counterparts in Spain. But the president expects all of our European allies, of course, to cooperate in this long sought-after mission, not just for the United States, but also for Europe, to crush the rogue Iranian regime that, again, not only threatens America, but also threatens our European allies as well. With respect to oil prices and the economy here at home, of course, this is something that Secretary Bessent, Secretary Wright, the National Economic Council of Energy, that is led by Secretary Burgum, has been long working on and well in advance. Yesterday, President Trump announced the U.S. Development Finance Corporation will provide political risk insurance at a very reasonable price for crude carriers and cargo ships operating in and around the Gulf. And as you pointed out, Jackie, the president said if necessary and when appropriate, the U.S. Navy will begin escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. I think it speaks to why this action was so necessary, that ultimately the energy industry is going to benefit from the president's actions with respect to Iran, because Iran will no longer be controlling the Strait of Hormuz and restricting the free flow of energy, which, as you all know, controls 20% of the world's global oil supply. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. The president said yesterday there wasn't time to make evacuation plans because this all happened so quickly. Given how critical the president has been of the chaotic evacuation from Afghanistan by the last administration 5 years ago, why wasn't there more of a focus on evacuation plans from the Middle East that could have been at least put in place, ready to go before the strikes this weekend?
Again, I just laid out for you that there have been plans in place and that the State Department has been very clear to the American people traveling within this region not to travel to these regions. We gave notices to leave immediately the countries where these Americans were within. And unlike the previous administration, we actually have a number. We actually have identified the number of people in the region who have requested help. We are in direct contact and engagement with them. And you have to keep in mind, there's a few thousand people who have requested assistance to come home in comparison to the millions who we understand are in the region. So we will help every single American who wants to come home if they're making that request of the State Department.
Americans who called the State Department hotline as recently as last night were being told, we can't help you, you have to make your own plans.
Well, the line was updated, and I expect every single person in this room to report on that accurately so that information can be relayed appropriately to your audiences and to the American people. I think as journalists, you all have a responsibility to let them know that the line has been updated accordingly with the proper guidance, because I saw many people in this room very quick to do selfie videos with the line yesterday, but not so quick to report on the corrected message today. So that is something the administration quickly worked to address, and we have fixed that problem. However, we're also pointing to people to the website, again, to register so that we know exactly where you are. So when there are commercial flights moving into that area, when there are chartered flights moving into that area, we can get Americans on planes as quickly as possible.